It's January, which means we are in the thick of transfer season, and it also means that there are wild rumors and news stories flying everywhere about potential transfers, and there are some that just make me stop and go, no way, that absolutely cannot happen. And it's never because of the team acquiring the player, it's the team willing to sell a player in the middle of a season in which they are competing. I know money drives everything, but sometimes, even financially, it doesn't make sense. We're going to talk about 5 transfers that are being rumored and are being reported that absolutely, positively should not happen this January. We're going to dive into those next here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub. January transfers are sort of a weird thing. You're in the middle of a season, all of a sudden you're going to be sold to another club, and you could go from playing for nothing to playing for something, or being in a relegation battle to playing for a title, or competing for a European spot. And it happens in other pro leagues, but in American sports, half the league is not playing for anything by the middle of their season because we don't have relegation, you're not competing for European spots, so unless you're trying to get in the playoffs or you're really competing for a title, your season's sort of done halfway through, and so this happens all the time. But in football, it happens too much. And I'm not talking about the acquiring teams, right? I get why some of these big clubs who are possibly not living up to expectations or need to fill in for injuries want reinforcements and they've got the money to spend. Totally makes sense from their end. But there are too many selling clubs this time of year who are still competing for something. And yes, there is money to be made, and obviously the money is what talks, but the possible loss of money by selling a player who is important to you in a season in which you are competing is way too great, and it's not factored in enough, and some of these clubs just frankly should not be selling their players at this point. So we have pinpointed 5 guys who are actively being rumored right now this January. They're actively being courted by big clubs, at least. They are being sought after, and they absolutely should not be traded. We're going to talk about who they are, and there are more than just these 5, but we're going to break down 5 that absolutely should not be sold by their clubs this January. But before we do that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get down in the comment section. Do you think these clubs should be selling these players? There are others that I missed. Leave them down in the comments as well. You can also leave comments on Twitter at Pitchside Pub, and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. So before we get into the 5, I want to sort of go over the stipulations here, right? Too many clubs, as I said before, too many clubs are selling at this time of year because so many clubs are still competing for something. Here are the stipulations for a club that should actively be willing to sell, because too many clubs are, and it really should meet these criteria. You should only be selling in January if you can get significantly more money in January than you'll be able to get the coming summer. Is this a player who's going to lose value? Why are you selling him now? Why is it such a priority when you are in the middle of a season? Unless you can get 40, 50 million euros more now than you're going to be able to get 6 months from now, what is the rush? Is the market going to go away? That's something these selling clubs should be asking themselves. Maybe if you find a really desperate buyer who's willing to massively overpay, or if you think your player is massively overachieving and is going to take a huge step back, okay, I guess that could be a justification. But boy, those opportunities, those instances are really few and far between. So you really got to look and see, like, am I going to make that much more money now than I could make in 6 months? If so, why not keep our very good player, who's obviously good enough to be courted by big clubs? Let's keep him for 6 more months and get the value out of him. The other factor is if you have nothing to play for. Now, this is not a big window. You have to not be in contention to win your league, or get a European spot, or be relegated. That's not a lot of clubs. If you look at the tables across Europe, especially with all the European competitions now, and the money that can be made from those competitions, and that's really the key here, because there are a lot of fan bases that go, well, what do we care about the Conference League for? Well, that may be a fair argument as a fan. You may not care about winning the Conference League, Chelsea fans, but there's money to be made there, and maybe that money doesn't mean much to a club like Chelsea, but as a selling club who may be in that 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th place in the table, they're a mid-table club in their respective leagues, that is significant money, and there is a lot of money to be made by making these tournaments. In fact, before we get into the players, let's break down just how much money is left on the table at these respective tournaments. For the Conference League, you make 3.1 million euros just from making it, and then about 133,000 euros per point that you get. If you win a match, you get 400,000. You draw, you get 133,000, and then you can see how much more is to be made if you continue to advance in that tournament. So you're talking a minimum of 4 to 5 million in the Conference League just for making it, and that's if you don't have any success in it. The Europa League goes up a little bit. There's not a huge difference between the Conference League and the Europa League, but we're talking 3.6 million to make it, 210,000 per point in the group stage, and then you can see it goes up as you continue to advance. The big money is in the Champions League. That's obviously where the huge money is. So the difference between the Europa League and the Champions League is massive. And that's a key point we're going to make in this video, are clubs that are sort of on that bubble between those leagues and are considering selling. How, when the money is this great between the two? Look at this Champions League money. Just for making the Champions League, you get 18.6 million euros. And then for every point you earn in the league phase, you get 700,000 euros. So minimum, a Champions League spot is worth 20 to 25 million euros. That is a ton of money, especially that's a ton of money for any club, right? Even the big clubs, that's significant money. But for these mid-tier clubs who are teetering in that 4th, 5th place, in the leagues that get 4 spots, that is game-changing money. So that has to be factored in. If you are selling a player in January and you are on the cusp of a Champions League spot, are you getting 20 to 25 million euros more now in January than you could get by selling the same player later this summer? That's the threshold that needs to be cleared to justify a sale, and it's probably even more than that if you think you can actually win some games in the Champions League. This can go to 40 or 50 million very quick, and that doesn't even factor in the locker room, the dressing room morale, the player morale that comes from these guys competing hard all season, and then you sell off a starter and they go, what are we working for? I thought we were trying to win something here. So it's obviously about the money, but the money has to be factored in, because by selling it, you are potentially costing yourselves considerable money. If you are selling a player who contributes, a regular, a starter in any way, that can be the difference between 4th and 5th place, where the difference in the table oftentimes is a point or two. That can absolutely cost you 20 to 30 million euros in the long run. So if you're going to make a January transfer, you'd better damn well be sure you're going to make that money, that much more money in January than you could make in the summer. All right, now we've broken down the costs and the money at stake here. Let's get into the 5 players that I've picked.
Number 5.
All right, number 5 is Zion Suzuki, the 22-year-old Japanese-American goalkeeper at Parma, who's being linked to Manchester United. And this one's a crazy one because they have Onana. I don't know that Suzuki's good enough to come in and take his place now, so I don't get the urgency even from the buyer side here. But Parma, you would be nuts to try and sell him right now, not because they are on the cusp of a European spot, but because they are barely safe from relegation. Look at this Serie A table. Parma's sitting 14th, which you'd think would give them a little bit of a buffer, but that 19 points is only 2 points above the relegation zone. Meanwhile, their backup is Argentinian Leandro Chichizola, who has barely played, hasn't made a top division start before this year since 2019. Suzuki has started 18 of the 20 games for Parma, and if you look at relegation costs in Serie A, being relegated from Serie A to Serie B can cost a team 25 to 30 million euros. So again, are you going to get 25 to 30 million more for Suzuki right now than you could get in the summer, where, by the way, there may be more suitors than just Manchester United. And Manchester United's been on him for a while. They wanted him last summer. But this isn't even a big sale. He was purchased. Parma just bought him this past summer for $7 million. Transfer market, for what it's worth, only has him valued at $9 million. So how much more are they really going to make off of this sale? This isn't even a big sale that's bringing a lot of money. So Parma, you would be absolutely nuts to sell him right now when you are in the thick of a relegation battle and he is your starting goalkeeper. Why you would do this now for, let's say it's 12 to 15 million euros and risk a 25 to 30 million euro loss by getting relegated is absolutely beyond me.
Number 4.
Next up is Antonee Robinson, the Fulham left back, who has become one of the best left backs in the Premier League. The British-English national who plays for the United States men's national team is having a fantastic season, and because it's at Fulham, naturally he is going to be linked to bigger clubs. And he's been linked to a whole bunch from Manchester United, Liverpool, City, even Real Madrid a little bit. So Fulham, if they want, is going to cash in on him at some point. He is in his prime. He's 27 years old. He's playing fantastic football. The question is, what does Fulham have to lose here? And the answer could be a European spot. Now, Fulham currently sits in 9th place, which is sort of mid-table and makes you think, okay, they're not really playing for that much. But you've got to look at the possible available European spots in the Premier League this year. They could be getting that fifth. In fact, they are most likely getting a 5th Champions League spot, which then means Europa League is 6, Conference League is 7, could even go down to 8 depending on who wins FA and Carabao Cups. So the cutoff for European spots is almost certainly going to be 7 and could be 8, which means Fulham is only a spot or 2 out of that. They are definitely still competing for something, and there is the ancillary possibility of, because Antonee Robinson's been with Fulham for a long time, if they manage to get a European spot, could that be enough to keep him? Could that be enough to make him go, okay, the big clubs are calling, but we're in Europe now too. I've been at Fulham for a long time, having success. Give me a new contract, pay me a little more, and I'll stick around. It could be a long shot, but nevertheless, Fulham is absolutely competing for one of those European spots. They're probably not getting up into the Champions League, but remember, to make the Conference League was a 4 to 6 million euro boost. So again, are they going to get 5-6 million euro more for Antonee Robinson right now than they could get this summer? That's the question. I guess that's a possibility if you could get a little bit of a bidding war going, but he has been one of, if not Fulham's best player. And that's really the reasoning here, is that would have to be so demoralizing for Marco Silva and his team to sell one of your best players in the midst of what is one of your best seasons. It's been a while since Fulham has really competed like this. They're having a fantastic season, and Jedi Robinson is a huge part of why they're having that success. So to sell off one of the catalysts for their success in the middle of a great season really just makes you stop and go, what are you even competing for? If not this, then what are you competing for? They're probably going to lose him at some point. Players will understand that it's a business, but to do it mid-season would be demoralizing mentally for the players, for the club, for the fan base, and it could actually cost them money if that was the reason why they missed out on one of the extra European spots by a point or 2 this season in the Premier League.
Number 3.
Number 3 is Nicolo Savona, the 21-year-old right back for Juventus, who only recently became a starter for Juventus after taking over for the aging Danilo. And he's getting a lot of playing time, and he's been linked to Manchester City in part because he locked up Jeremy Doku when they played. And he's a young, talented player who I guess will probably move on at some point, although Juventus really needs young, affordable, talented players, and he's a guy who came out of their academy, so they didn't even pay any money for him, which is actually probably part of why they would be willing to sell him, because it would be pure revenue for their books. But nevertheless, he would still be cheap because he's young, he's on his first professional contract, and to sell him to Manchester City in the middle of the season could cost them a lot of money. Look at Juventus in relation to the Serie A table. Juventus is sitting 5th, which right now looks like a Europa League spot, but they're only 3 points away from a Champions League spot, and Italy could easily be one of the countries that gets 5 Champions League spots. So if they were to miss the Champions League spot, whether it's spot 4 or spot 5 in the table, if they were to miss that, you're talking about a 15 to 20 million euro loss minimum, and that's without winning a whole lot of games or making a run or getting out of the group stage, all of which they are very much equipped to do. So again, are you going to get more for the player now than you could get in the summer? If they want to choose to sell him, that's its own discussion. I would still say that they should hold on to young, affordable talent, but if Manchester City really wants to blow them out of the water with an offer this summer, okay, you listen. But why now? Why can't it wait till this summer? Juventus is in the thick of competing. Yes, they have Danilo as a backup, but there's a reason why Savona came in and took his place. He has become their every game starter at right back, and he's playing well. So again, demoralizing. It could cost them points in the table. Now is not the time for Juventus to be selling anybody who is regularly contributing.
Number 2.
Okay, here's where it gets really crazy. Omar Marmoush, who is the leading scorer for Eintracht Frankfurt, who is having a great season, being linked to Manchester City for tons of money, and that's really the key factor here, is the tons of money. But he's your leading scorer, and you have managed to get to third in the Bundesliga. You are looking at one of your best seasons in a long, long time. Possible Champions League money coming next year. And this is the guy that's leading your attack, and you're possibly going to sell him? It's absolutely ludicrous. Now, to be fair, this one is coming more from the Manchester City side, who are looking to add to their attack, although I'm not sure why they're looking for a center forward. But nevertheless, they are looking for a big splash, and he is a guy having a lot of success. Why Eintracht Frankfurt would even consider this is beyond me. There is the players factor of he gets some attention from a big club and wants to go, but at some point you just have to say, no, we are competing for too much here. Eintracht Frankfurt, you have a chance to upset the apple cart in the Bundesliga and grab a Champions League spot. That is 25-30 million euros at risk here. So again, is that 65 to 70 million that City is sort of putting out there, or that's their asking price for him? Eintracht Frankfurt's asking price, is that 30 million more than you're going to be able to get this coming summer? Is there any reason to believe that you wouldn't be able to get this summer? Now, you have to remember that he was a free transfer only a year and a half ago, so this is an opportunity for massive profit, pure revenue for Eintracht Frankfurt, and that is hard to turn down, but so is the opportunity to make the Champions League. I mean, what are we doing at some point, and why can't you go get that profit this summer? Why can't you make that money, make that big transfer this summer after you've locked up your Champions League spot for next year? So this one's coming more from City than from Eintracht Frankfurt. So I would think this isn't going to happen, but the fact that this is even being entertained or considered legitimate rumors is absolutely nuts. If a club like Frankfurt sells their leading goal scorer, and he's their leading goal scorer by a fair amount. If they were to sell their leading goal scorer in the thick of a Champions League race in the middle of the season, you know what? You'd have what's coming to you at that point.
Number 1.
Speaking of having what's coming to you, our last player is Ipswich Town striker Liam Delap, who, God, I hope they don't sell, but if they did, you would deserve every bit of relegation coming your way if you chose to make this move. Liam Delap is their catalyst. He is their goal scorer. The biggest thing that recently promoted teams struggle with is the final move, right? Getting the ball in the net. They can do a lot of other things well. It's having that goal scorer, in part because their goal scorers get poached by bigger clubs. And Liam Delap will probably move on to a bigger club at some point because he is a fantastic young striker and a really great goal scorer. He's being considered for a role with England, which will probably happen at some point. But why now? The punishment for getting relegated is estimated, depending on revenues year over year, somewhere between a 50 and 100 million euro penalty. That's the difference between being in the Premier League and being relegated to the Championship. Are you going to make 50 to 100 million euros more by selling Liam Delap right now than you would this summer, where there will be tons of attention for him? If you want to sell him this summer, they're going to cash in Ipswich Town. You are going to make a ton of money on Liam Delap if you choose to sell him, but not now. Because if you were to do it now, you will probably get relegated. He is your main goal scorer. He is your catalyst. And frankly, you wouldn't be outside. You wouldn't be above the relegation zone if it weren't for Liam Delap. And if you get rid of him, you won't be above it for long. So again, this is probably rumors coming from other clubs more so than Ipswich Town. Clubs who need goal scoring help and are interested in Liam Delap. They may not have any real attention in selling him, but that money starts to talk, and the opportunity to cash in, makes owners greedy and makes people want to take a chance while they've got the offer on the table. It's hard to say no to multiple $1 million offers. Liam Delap may be hearing interest from his old club, Man City, or Arsenal, who could use a legitimate striker, or other clubs who want to upgrade at the position, and he may be starting to think about other things other than where he's at. This is sort of happens. There is a human nature to it, but Ipswich Town is fighting so hard to stay up in the Premier League, to stay above that relegation zone, What do you think happens? Forget the actual production of Liam Delap, which they would miss greatly, but what happens to that dressing room when they sell their striker in the midst of a battle that they are in? You're going to lose that fight. The team is going to lose their ability to fight if you do that. So if a club who is on the cusp of relegation sells off a player like this in January, they would deserve every relegation coming their way. Ipswich Town, I hope, is smart enough not to do that. But once the transfer season hits, you just never know. I would love to get your comments, get your thoughts. Get down in that comment section. Let me know what you think about these players, about others that I missed. These are just 5 I thought of that I've come across with rumors, but I'm sure there are more. Get in that comment section. Let me know who else falls into this category and what you think about these 5. You can also leave comments on Twitter at PitchsidePub. While you're at it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel and check out the website, pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub.